kids, and I'm like, okay, I understand how I have to go through the system and understand the reality, and then start using like these pieces of legislation and these new laws that are making a total difference. This law was not since the beginning of my case. We first got divorced in 2019. During the marriage was abusive, but I didn't raise that to anybody. It was very hard for me to recognize in the situation that I was, and it was a lot of confusion and fog, and so I didn't feel strong enough to talk about that. Then 2 years after the divorce, my son, at that point he was 8, the oldest one, he disclosed in the school some physical abuse, and I remember we were called by Child Protective Services, and since then everything started from one day to the other one in the neglect and abuse court. At that point, it was 2022, and it was still Kayden's law was not adopted for Colorado, and it was extremely difficult. I didn't have a lawyer. I needed to find somebody. I didn't have money or a credit card to pay a retainer, so it was a very hard time. But I think that the fire that woke in me, that I didn't have it for myself. I didn't have a doubt for my children, and so I was there. I found a new lawyer that he took $300 from as a retainer, and we start working. And it was very, very hard. It was very hard to see how the children's voice and the children's safety is not prioritized, and it continues being prioritized. The rights of the parents, even before understanding the whole picture, they were immediately trying to understand how was going to reunify this child with the father. So we continue, Luca, and all the forensic interviews that he had, he continued holding the story the experience, that awful experience that he had. He said that his father took him by the neck and put him against the wall, and that he could not breathe. At that point, he was 8, and the courage that Luca had immediately got into me, and we tried to communicate the best that we could. And even then, social services continue pushing this. And eventually, 3 days after the disclosure, he was thrown into a small room full of cameras and guards, and he didn't understand what was happening. I couldn't say anything. The court said, you cannot tell your children where you're taking them. This is against my parenting time because age appropriate, but I say to them what is expected in their day-to-day life. They got there, they scattered, then eventually they got into the room, and out of fear, Jerome, his father, was saying things in his ear, and eventually my son said, everything that I said is not true. And so they took that piece, and they said that they needed to dismiss the case. At that point, we were loose in the court system, and there was not a path forward. They said, we're not going to prosecute, but we are going to you guys have to figure out, and this child has to see the father. So at that point, I had a PCDM, and everything that everybody talked was reunification therapy. So I said, okay, we are going to do this, and we are going to make an agreement with the PCDM that when the reunification therapy is concluded, then we are going to see if they can come back together. And the reunification therapist that we hire, he started talking with Luca first, and then with everybody, and then he said this child is still processing trauma, and he has to work first individually before bringing the two together. So I think that was very responsible from him, like to see that from the child. But I know that is not the majority. And since then, the father was upset about that, and we ended up in court. The father continued being heightened by all of this, that he was losing control, that he was not being, his agenda was not being honored. So he followed me. He was following us in the house, showing up unexpected, and then eventually they gave me a temporary protection order. After that temporary protection order, we had like a year to see what was going to happen, and he violated it. So that became permanent for me. At that point, things continue, and the little one, Nico, stopped wanting to go with that too, and we ended up in family court. At that point, he was refusing to pay child support. we were fighting for the uh, custody, that he said that he had the right to see the children. At this point, his lawyer, that is very, very good lawyer, he was talking about all of this alienation, and it's the mom, and the mom is the one that is making the children reject the father. And thankfully, like all of these other things took time, and even when it's so frustrated, but going through the process, by this point we have been in court almost 3 years. So a year and a half ago came Kayden's law, and I literally found Kayden's law in the internet. Like, I have a lot of sleepless nights, and at 3 in the morning, that's my magic number. And I remember that I started seeing like the United Nations report, and that threw me through the cadence law, and that's how I learned about that. I share with my lawyer, who is new and doesn't have much of experience, and he's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "He's like, where are you finding this?" And I'm like, "No, this sounds that is real. Like, it's through the United Nations, right?" And so he was like, yeah, but then eventually I start researching more, and I was pushing about it, and I'm saying like, look, this is exactly like my case, and this is what they're trying to do, and I think that right now we can say no. And so eventually last year they put a CFI, and the CFI made a report. The CFI saw some stuff, and at the same time missed many others, and so they continue with the narrative of alienation, and then eventually this December, the final hearing, we put it for February, just this year, and we sat in there, and they hire an expert in alienation. So he made a little report about alienation and what he thought that it was happening in this case. And I needed to hire an expert. So her name is Dr. Kelly Champion. I researched a lot and got through a parenting program that I took for myself, and that's why I see all of these parallel like skills to how to deal with children with trauma, right? Or how to be there and present yourself better for your children while you are going through all of this, right? And so then they gave me a little bit of information, and I call in here is called Safe House Alliance, and that is for domestic violence and DV, and they have like a little department for legal resources. But they basically, I literally call all Colorado, and they didn't know about Cadence Law, and they didn't know about who could actually testify and help me with giving weight to this case. Because I last month, when you had the author and attorney like Meg Grove, I think that she made a big important point too, that I have recognized, that is the need of experts that are actually open to offer their testimony. Because what I have found sometimes, like, since psychologists are like neutral party, or they are like, their clients are the children, or the client is the mom, or the client is the dad, right? A lot of time they don't want to participate in court. They want to preserve this this client privilege, like as a main goal for them. So it's very hard, because they're doing the work outside. But I was saying, like, who is going to talk in the court, and who is going to give weight to this? Because at the end is the mom that is accused of alienation, and the father that says like none of this has happened and everything is in their imagination, right? So Dr. Champion gave a good testimony in there, and that was helpful. Is still, you see all the cracks and how they try to take all of this down. But then eventually, during our hearing, that it was like 6 hours hearing or 8 hours, the judge was not happy about it. The magistrate, he was a little bit frustrated about understanding what was first, like, give the father the reunification and then work, or do the work father and then have contact with the children. And that was my main point. My main point in the testimony was, and it was hard for me, because I knew that I could not say in court that I was opposing reunification therapy. And it's very hard, because I felt that I was against my beliefs. But again, like, understanding the system, I was almost going to give them more breadcrumbs to make their idea of alienation. So I said, I am not opposing that the children have some type of relationship at some point with a father that I understand that loves them, but that needs to work on himself and gain skills for the safety of the children. So that was heard, and in Kayden's law, and it was Kayden's law. It was not my testimony, right? But eventually, we got the order, and the order said that the father has to take some type of accountability, and that he has to be measured that accountability, and that he has to go and be evaluated by a specific entity here in Colorado before making any steps towards reunification or to repair this relationship. And I know that this was the big piece and the big difference, because many cases that we all know in different states, mothers have ended up in jail. And I think that I would have been one of these two, because at this point, there's two of my children that are not having contact or are refusing contact because of many, many instances, but um, they continue pushing this. And at the same time, it was heard, Kayden's law encapsulates more than just the children too, because it brought me into, since I have now a permanent protection order, there has been domestic violence. So in the way that Colorado adopted the language, I believe, Daniel, that it was the state that put it almost like how you guys created the law. They didn't took that much out of it. So I think that they recognize the claims of abuse in the family as a whole, not only through a child, but to the mom too. So that has made a big difference. At the same time, it's not easy. Now he's going to ask for a review, and we continue in here. Um, and like as Danielle was saying, right, like this new law, and through these new cases, is going to everybody start shaping the understanding of what is all of this, right? So it's very interesting to see. I have a lot of gratitude for Danielle and for Professor Mayer and for the amazing mom of Cadence, that I cannot imagine what is to be in her shoes, and for many other people that has put this together through advocacy, and then now I have the honor and the gratitude to say, like, my family and my children have benefited from this. So thank you so much for your time and hearing my story, and thank you so much.